Please, I can't breathe. Please, man.
The horrible images of homicide by cop in Minnesota. The seemingly senseless death of yet another young black man ignites rioting. As a weary nation asks, why does this keep happening? In the nation's capital, Twitter moves to truth test Donald J. Trump, prompting protest from the president. Is the social media platform within its rights, or just playing partisan politics? Here at home, the pandemic drives unemployment to the highest level in Houston's history. How much worse will it get, and what can be done to soften the damage? I'm Greg Grugan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Charles Blaine, founder of Urban Reform. Next up, legendary reporter, now media consultant, Wayne Dolcefino. In the three spot, longtime super neighborhood leader, Tamaro Bell. Fox 26 legal analyst Carmen Rowe up next. Closing us out, well-known businessman and columnist Bill King. Let's begin. 8 excruciating minutes, 8 minutes of torture beneath the knee of a Minneapolis police officer. Much of humanity has now seen the life force slowly squeezed out of George Floyd's body in the name of public safety by a sworn peace officer bound to enforce the law, not break it. The dead man is black. The policeman responsible for his death is white. A fact which rips the scab off the festering issue of law enforcement brutality aimed disproportionately at African Americans. Friday, former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin was charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter. While those charges are just, they may not necessarily lead to justice for Floyd, a Houston native and graduate of Yates High School. Chauvin's arrest may also do little to calm riots, one of which led to the torching of a Minneapolis police precinct. It bears mention that police say Floyd was being taken into custody on suspicion of passing a counterfeit $20 bill. Intensifying the friction, President Trump felt compelled to tweet, quote, "Looting leads to shooting." Panel, America has an insidious, unaddressed problem that's been around a lot longer than this pandemic. Let's begin our discussion. Charles Blaine, your thoughts. You were at the protests in downtown Houston. Your thoughts on this issue?
Yeah, so I spent all day at the protest on Friday, and you know, I heard a lot of folks, friends, colleagues, and others who spoke out against the protest. And I think it's important to remember that it isn't the fabric of who we are as Americans to stand up against injustice and speak out. And so this was just a manifestation of that. And yeah, we see violence that comes out of it, and none of us should be condoning that, but we shouldn't be surprised to see these protests. I mean, there was reports that said that out of the 100 largest police departments, 38% of the people killed by those officers were African Americans, and they only made up 21% of the people in those jurisdictions. And so we cannot argue that there is not a problem there, though many people want to argue that. And even if you look at the crime in a lot of these places, Newark, New Jersey has a high rate of crime, a high population of African Americans, a low rate of police violence. And you look at Orlando and Spokane, Washington, places with lower African American populations, lower rates of violent crime, but higher rates of police violence on the citizens. And so this is a big issue. And as a conservative who believes in accountability and transparency, I can't help, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't speak out and call for transparency and accountability to the agency of government that is tasked with enforcing the laws that government makes. But what I find most frustrating about this is that there are people who are more concerned about the protest than about the fact that a cop kept his knee on the neck of an American, an unarmed American, an innocent American for 8 minutes, 2 minutes, and I believe 38 seconds of those where he was unresponsive. And as a black man in this country who is very fearful when the police pull him over or who gets followed in certain stores when I go to, it is frustrating to hear friends and colleagues and allies not recognize my frustration and not accept my lived experience because they don't see it themselves. And so I hope that they take this and realize that we have a serious issue that needs to be resolved. It's not going to be fixed by voting. It's not going to be fixed by anything other than empathy from a large portion of the country that doesn't have to have a father like my father did at 17 years old tell me not to drive through certain neighborhoods because I might get pulled over and not to go to certain stores. Until people realize and empathize with the other half of our country that has to live that every single day of their lives, I don't think we're going to see any resolution.
Wayne Delchifino, I know you fought injustice through your journalism, through much of your adult life. What's your take on this issue?
Look, when I was a reporter, when I first started out in the 70s, I was one of the guys that helped expose the bad Houston police shootings, the throwdown gun cases, right? So, look, no one sitting here today is going to justify anything that happened. That guy shouldn't have been a cop for a long time based on the records, okay? Here's my problem, okay? If you look at the stats, right? You look at the stats, every year, cops shoot. There's no like stats of people putting their foot on somebody's neck. But if you look at police shootings, a lot more white folks, a lot more, nearly twice as many white folks are shot by cops. Here's my problem. We don't know sitting here today whether or not these cops were just really bad cops, right? Who got sick and tired of crime, whatever kind of crime it was. We have no evidence that this is some bigger race thing. That's not to say Charles isn't totally right, that there has been systematic problems. We are moving forward in this country, and I'm not going to get dragged back. I just think that's the wrong way to go. And the other thing I want to say before we go any farther is if I was the mayor of Minneapolis, I would have pulled that police chief into my office. I would have fired his butt. The idea that we would let law and order disappear at the same time there was a criminal justice thing is to me insane. We have people burn police stations. Give me a break.
Tamara Bell, are we at a tipping point?
Look, we are past the tipping point, and I hear people talk about the burning and the burning and the burning. What the hell you think they learned that? You see the Klan's message and calling card was burning crosses in people's yards. That not I don't mean 20 years ago. I mean burning black churches, burning Earth Church ass and grass, and nobody said nothing, okay? So this is where it comes from, and this is when you see people angry and frustrated. They look at what can we do? Because it's not the first time. This isn't the first time something like this. I will tell you this, as somebody who does not grasp technology, I don't Facebook, Twitter, none of that. I praise God for the technology, because if it wasn't for the camera, if it was not for the camera, people would be saying, well, what did he do? Well, maybe that was his fifth $20 bill he passed. They would have been saying a whole lot of things. You see, the camera is why we're talking about Aubrey in Georgia. The camera is why we're talking about that dumbass lady in New York. That's why we're talking about it. We're looking at that. Look at the lady who was doing her job, who went to her house and got killed in a no-knock raid in Kentucky. It's not the first time. It's beyond a tipping point. I do not condone the burning. But don't sit up and say, oh, how could they burn it? How do you think it started? How do you think it started? And I thank the Minneapolis mayor who said, look, I ain't gonna worry about it. Let's not kill nobody. I can assure you, Target ain't suffered no loss because Target got insurance.
I want to hear from Carmen Rowe, our criminal attorney on the panel. 30 seconds for you, save 30 for Bill.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that our criminal justice system is mystified to the extent that people don't know what they don't know. This is a common problem, and it's one we are only seeing and addressing directly because we have videos. But I think it's important, in combination with some of the other things, to say this: there is no special pass for police officers. This officer committed a crime on a video, and the only people that give him a pass is society. The truth is the law applies to him the same as it does everybody else, and we shouldn't hold law enforcement to a lower standard. Instead, we should hold them to a higher standard. I would also say that although this is a case of third-degree felony, I think we're going to see additional charges when we get more information from the investigation.
20 seconds, Bill.
Look, I think that if I had walked into that store and passed a $20 bill that was a counterfeit, and somebody would have called the police, they would have treated me completely differently than they can treated Mr. And I just think that's a reality.
Yep.
And until we deal with that reality, we're going to continue to have this festering open sore in our society.
Got to leave it there. Still ahead, the president's favorite social media platform is truth testing Mr. Trump's online proclamations. And now the commander-in-chief is targeting Twitter. Stay with us. Our panel dives in after the break.
Social media companies that engage in censoring or any political conduct will not be able to keep their liability shield. That's a big deal.
President Trump striking back at Twitter after his favorite social media platform announced it would be fact-checking the statements he makes online. Mr. Trump accused Twitter and other powerful social media platforms of committing politically motivated censorship ahead of the fall election. So, panel, surprise. The president believes he's being treated unfairly, so he's pushing back. Bill King, what do you make of this?
Well, I thought the little note they put under his tweet was pretty innocuous. I doubt many people went and looked at it. But it does raise a really issue that concerns me. And the better example to me is what Google did on YouTube to these doctors out in California. There were two doctors that had, all the credentials in the world that basically put up this YouTube video that argued that the lockdown was not the right thing to do in California. And Google took it down, saying that it didn't meet their community standards because it was going to encourage people not to social distance. Well, that's a legitimate thing to have. So I'm not comfortable with some nameless executives at Facebook and Google and Twitter, censoring what we have and what is really a common carrier. I mean, we regulate TVs and televisions because they use the airwaves. This is a public infrastructure. I think we're going to have to regulate them in some way.
Charles Blaine, do you see censorship here?
To some extent, I do. I mean, I think I know Twitter and even Facebook argue that they use algorithms to determine if language is offensive or threatening and things like that. But I think with some of this more nuanced language, when we're just talking about whether something's factual or not, or if we're just determining if we like what someone said, you have some people who are making these decisions at Twitter and Facebook and elsewhere who are looking at this and kind of being the arbiters there. And so I do think that it is censorship, because I think we've plenty of times, whether it's deplatforming people on YouTube or elsewhere, seen them push conservative thought away and kind of, whether it's deplatform it or demonetize it or whatever the case is. So I do think it's censorship. And as Bill said, I do think there needs to be some sort of regulation there, because I think it's getting too far.
Wayne, do you have a problem with the timing here?
Well, no, because I think the president's right about this. Look, whether you agree or disagree with his tweets, I mean, my company operates with a lot of social media stuff, right? A lot of times they flag us for putting a word in there, which is a word that someone actually said. It's part of the reality of the subject we're discussing, right? I heard some Democratic official call someone a really bad word, right? A really bad word. Nobody said a word about that, right? Nobody said a word when all this Russian nonsense was going on, which I said was nonsense when it happened. Okay, if they want to play the editorial game, then they got to play the editorial game and they got to face the consequences. And when the guy running their editorial page called the people in the White House Nazis, and it's like CNN now. You can't trust the thing they say.
Okay, Wayne, we're going to leave it right there. Stay with us. We'll continue this discussion after the break. Welcome back. President Trump retaliating against Twitter after his favorite conduit to the American people says it will be fact-checking his statements and flagging tweets they believe are misleading or outright false. Question, should Joe Biden's far less numerous tweets undergo the same level of scrutiny? Answer that question and say whatever you want to say tomorrow.
Look, I think any of them should be fact-checked. I don't have a problem with it. If you don't like that medium and you don't like to be fact-checked, get your ass off of it. Twitter ain't a right to life. You ain't got to stay on there. That's something you decide. I don't tweet Twitter, Facebook, or any of that, as I just said. But let me tell you, somebody did send me something from like Mike, from Big Mike on Twitter that was amazing. So I said, maybe I'll borrow Charles's Twitter and I can be able to look at what he say, because I still ain't fit to open one.
Carmen Rowe, as you see this, do you question the timing? Do you think it should be turnabout fair play? Even all politicians should have their claims fact-checked.
I think this is fascinating because everybody who's anybody on social media knows it's the wild, wild west. They do whatever they want to. There's no regulation. If you've ever had a problem with or been a victim of any sort of cyberbullying or any problems on the internet, you know this. So while the reasoning may be wrong, in as much as finally Jack is responding to to Trump, and he's decided to reveal the fact that he's now going to censor him as everything, because the truth is there's plenty of documentaries out there that tell you that censorship is happening now. It's not regulated, which is what Wayne talked a little bit about, and it's a free-for-all, and it's not fairly applied. So, it's so funny because Mark Zuckerberg came right out and said, listen, we don't think we're truth masters and all this. He's doing that because he's smart enough to know he doesn't want to be regulated. But the truth is, this is the right result for America. It needed to happen, and even though it's happening because, once again, Trump has upset somebody enough that they've come out of their shell a little bit, I love it. I'm glad it's happening. I hope it continues to get some regulation on social media across the board, including Facebook.
Bill King, anybody knows about the history of journalism in this country knows that for the majority of our history, media sources have picked a side. And it's only been for a few decades that journalistic entities claim to be even-handed. Your thoughts? I mean, are people just picking sides here in the media?
I don't know, Greg. When I was at the Chronicle, there's a division between the news side and the editorial side. And it was very, back in those days at least, it was very much segregated. And on the news side, you did have editors that reviewed the stories. And look, there's no question, anytime somebody's editing anything, some of their biases are going to get built into that. But it seems like to me in a previous time, there was at least an attempt to not let that happen on the news side. Then you had the opinion side, which said, look, this is our opinion. Well, those two things, that distinction is completely gone today. And I think we know less about what actually happens in the world because we've lost that.
Yep.
Wayne, do you agree with that assessment?
Absolutely. And look, our local paper, I complain about the Chronicle all the time. There are major things going on in this city, investigative things going on in this city. Forget the COVID stuff, right? That are not covered. And I believe it's because of political bias. I believe the people on the editorial side are now controlling the agenda. I believe the networks, and the former president of CBS News said it the other day, but the networks now have decided the only play for them is a partisan play. And that is so bad for this country. Both locally and nationally, I think it's horrible because nobody knows what the hell to believe, who to trust, what stats are right anymore. I think it's going to be contributed to a major downward spiral in this country in terms of information.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Up next, the news is bad and getting worse for the Bayou City economy, the hard numbers and the hard times ahead when we come back. Welcome back. This week, thanks to the pandemic shutdown and the global collapse in energy demand, Houston set another record. Never has the unemployment rate been higher. We asked economist Patrick Jankowski of the Greater Houston Partnership for his assessment of the crippled economy. Fair to say he did not sugarcoat his findings.
Well, right now we've lost 330,000 jobs so far. We don't have the May data in yet. I suspect when the May data comes in that we will probably be close to having lost 400,000 jobs. So let's look at the Great Recession, the one that happened just 10 years ago. The region only lost about 110,000 jobs in the Great Recession. The unemployment rate got up maybe about 8 or 9, 10%. It did not get up as to where it is right now. Right now it's at 14.2. I suspect the unemployment rate will get up above 20% before this is over with. Another reference point, think about the downturn which occurred with the oil and gas industry in the 80s. The region lost 221,000 jobs. Of course, the economy was a lot smaller then. That was 1 in every 7 jobs. Right now, we've lost 1 in every 10 jobs. But when we get the May numbers out, I suspect we'll be at the point where we've lost 1 in every 7 jobs in the region. The layoffs that are occurring quietly in Houston are the ones that are occurring on the white-collar jobs in the oil and gas firms. We've already lost in Houston in the last 2 months 13,000 oil and gas jobs. I suspect that will double, if not triple, over the next year. We know the second quarter is going to be very bad. We're looking at probably a GDP drop in the second quarter for the U.S. of about a third, about 33%. We'll start to see some gradual improvement in the third quarter and fourth quarter, hopefully. But even then, we'll finish up the year with a much smaller economy than we started with. We probably won't get back to the normal level of GDP until the middle of next year, if not the second half of next year. Even that being said, job recovery is going to be very slow. We could see ourselves with double-digit unemployment rate for the next 2 to 3 years easily. We're not going to be spending as much or buying as much, and so that's going to be weighing on the recovery as well. So people are probably willing to accept jobs at much lower pay than they earned earlier. Signing bonuses aren't going to be offered. The perks aren't going to be there. But if it's a job with benefits, people are going to be glad to take it because there are going to be so few jobs out there. This is not going to be a repeat of the Great Depression. We see a Congress that definitely wants to act to try to do things to make things a lot better. We've got the Fed that's doing everything it can to keep the economy going. Yes, we're going to struggle for a while, but we're not going to struggle for 10 years. Of course, this is not going to be over with in a year. I'm afraid that won't be over with in 2 years, but this is not going to drag out for 10 years. We will take action and things will improve way before then.
Coming up, with every sector of the economy sagging and folks fearful of a second viral wave, what can be done to cushion the collapse? Our panel tackles the topic after the break. Welcome back. Just think about it. Less than 3 months ago, just about anyone who wanted a job in Houston, Texas, could find one. Now, furloughs, salary cuts, and the prospect of 20% unemployment in this once thriving city appear a grim certainty. Stimulus money can help for a while, but regardless of who is in the White House, Uncle Sam's printing press can't keep rolling indefinitely. Panel, each of you have friends and contacts throughout our vast community. What are you hearing out there? I'm going to start with Charles Blaine.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we started this show talking about the protests, and I think that's what I'm hearing is that we're going to see more of those, and not necessarily because of police violence, but because, civil unrest is often sparked by expensive housing and no jobs and poverty and other things like that. And we're seeing a lot of that because of what we saw with these shutdowns. So my executive director at Urban Reform Institute, Joel Kotkin, and I have an article out right now that just came out yesterday. We wrote it 3 weeks ago that talked about how this summer we might see these cities kind of boiling over because of frustration, economic despair, and frustration from that. And so I think we're going to see that. You hear a lot of people frustrated out there because the prospects are just slim. There's really nothing to look forward to at this point.
Bill King, what does 20% unemployment in Houston, Texas look like? I mean, we've never seen it before, not in our lifetime.
No, I remember back in the 80s when things got pretty bad here, but we never got anywhere close to 20% unemployment. I mean, Houston's really in the middle of a perfect storm right now. You've got all the problems with the COVID and what the lockdown did on that. And that, frankly, will go away over time. That's probably a one-year event. But this problem with the energy industry, I think, is a much, much longer lasting problem for us, because the truth of the matter is people all over the world are trying to figure out ways to burn fewer fossil fuels. A lot of smart people are working on that problem. They're going to be around for a long time, don't misunderstand me, and we're going to have a role in providing that source of energy. But that marketplace seems to be headed down to me. And I just think in the long term, we better figure out something else to do besides go find oil and gas.
That's right.
Tomorrow, what are you hearing out in the neighborhoods?
In the neighborhoods, the main thing that people are concerned about is the evictions. That moratorium is gone. That's over. And those cases are about to start being heard. They're going to start. They were behind, so they're going to start with February. But that is a game changer. I said it on the show last week. I'm telling you all, that problem right there, if it gets to play out the way it's set up to play out, this is going to be a city that none of us have ever seen. As Bill said, in the 80s, Bill was working and established with a family. I was in college. I saw it. I didn't see it the way he saw it, but I ended up having to completely change in my senior year, my major, because my professors told us, you won't get a job for the next 2 years if you come out with this degree in chemical engineering. And one of the things that I want people to make sure is that we got to do something to prepare, because the instability with the COVID and the oil is going to have such a heavy impact. Institutions that we might have thought were on the wayside are going to be the ones that we're going to have to lean on. For example, your kid might have been going to Howard, Hampton, or Harvard, but now you don't have your engineering job at Exxon, Chevron, or Schlumberger. So now HCC may be the only place your kid can go. And let me tell you, I hate to agree with Wayne, but one of the things he talked about is what's not being said in our local television, the alleged corruption and mismanagement that's going on HCC. But we're going to need HCC harder than we've ever needed before, and nobody is talking about it.
Wayne, I know you reported in Houston in the 80s. You reported on the fall of Enron. You were here in 2008. I mean, what do you think is happening in this city, and are you afraid?
So I'm going to take oil out because Bill talked about it. I argued we should have never shut down this city. The people that are most going to be hurt are, quite frankly, not guys like me. And I'm not bragging. My company had the best month ever last month, okay? It's going to be the lower income, it's going to be blue-collar workers. It's going to be the minority community. They are going to be hit the hardest by decisions made by the people they support politically. Lena Hidalgo and Sylvester Turner. Those decisions to shut down this economy because of a virus that sure was horrible, but should never have shut down the economy. They're the ones to blame for this. I'm sorry, they are.
Carmen Rowe, your social circles and professional circles, what are you hearing out there?
You know, I'm not from a generation that has such historical knowledge, but most of the people in my community are living on government money, stimulus money. Unemployment apparently is paying better than some jobs right now. And my fear is that we're going to run out of that money, and where do we end up? I will say, though, that I don't think the sky is falling. You know, Houston is an industrial city. We're resilient. We're going to have to adapt to the change, and I hope everybody does just that. Right now, we're working together. We have to continue to do that. I know the evictions are coming up, but I'll also tell you that the judges who make the decisions about how those evictions are dealt with are people who live in this community, who hopefully watch this show and know how bad this community is hurting. And so working together going forward is going to be everything for Houston, just like it was last night.
Gonna leave it there. Coming up, pandemic or no pandemic, the president wants a full-blown GOP convention. Is he leading the reopening by example or putting thousands of lives at risk? We're gonna hear from Republican delegates and what they have to say, so stick around. Welcome back. In 2016, the GOP convention in Cleveland was Donald Trump's launching pad for a successful march to the White House. 4 years later, amid the pandemic, the president wants the same kind of platform for his re-election bid and is threatening to pull the convention out of Charlotte if North Carolina's Democratic governor fails to lift restrictions. This week, I spoke to two local Republican delegates who say they're willing to accept the risk and believe Donald Trump is making the right call.
All the delegate members that I have talked to that have been before, that planned on going before COVID-19 ever became an issue, want to be part of the next convention.
It's just become a political issue. We need to stop that right now. We need to get back to work here in Houston and get these people back to work. This is a disease that, by anybody's measure, is a 98 to 99% survival rate of those who do get it. And so it's time now to get back to work, and I'm looking forward to doing that with the convention, national convention, either in North Carolina or, who knows, maybe Houston.
If I had a parent or grandparent that was medically fragile, would I ask them to go to the convention? No, I would not. Absolutely would not. And I don't know of anybody that I've talked to that would. At the end of the day, this is about resuming life for those of us that can. Those that feel like they need to continue to be isolated, let's encourage them to do so.
It's a problem. We don't want people sick, and we certainly don't want people to die. I get that. But in the scheme of things, you know, it's time now to get back to work. Now that we have real data, we have real knowledge about what the disease is doing.
Still ahead, a new poll found 20% of America's teachers fearful of COVID-19 say they won't return to their classroom this fall. Our panel explores the ramifications after this short break. Welcome back. A survey this week found 1 in 5 teachers saying they will not return to their brick and mortar classrooms in the fall because of lingering concerns over COVID-19. Many of those same teachers may seek to remain on the payroll by instructing remotely. Meantime, Governor Greg Abbott told Fox 26 he fully intends for all of the state's public schools to be open and safe this fall for both students and their teachers.
The goal is this, and that is we want schools to open as scheduled with students in classrooms knowing it's the best learning environment for our children. We understand, however, that we need to have new and safer protocols in place to make sure that we prevent COVID from spreading in the school setting, and we are working on those strategies as we speak.
Okay, panel, considering the potential for a second wave of COVID-19, should Texas open public schools this fall? And should teachers be compelled to teach in their classrooms, or should they be allowed to teach remotely? I know Tamara Bell once was in the classroom as an instructor. What do you think?
I do think that they need to modify it and make it a way to the teachers. That was my only concern. Because if you put up a visual screen or whatever in the classroom and have the teacher speaking to the students while they're in there, and let's say if she's in a room to the left or to the right or whatever, or if they have an area, I think it can be done effectively and efficiently, because there's too many schools and they spend too much money on them not to use those brick and mortar buildings, especially here in Houston, where they just finished doing a whole bunch of schools over, including Lamar High School, which is one of the largest populated schools in the state of Texas. But it has to be done in a way that they feel safe, because you all know flu season come, one kid got it in class, the whole class got it.
Wayne, I grew up in rural Texas. I can tell you this, a lot of those school districts are going to say, if you're not showing up at the classroom, you're not getting a paycheck.
Yeah, look, I am a professor of brutal honesty on this show, okay? And I grew up in Brooklyn, right, where you get your butt kicked every day just trying to get to school, okay? So the reality is, we're going to reopen school. People are going to go back to work. If they don't want to work, they don't get paid. Sorry.
What do you think of that, Charles Blaine, your generation?
Yeah, well, since we're all talking about where we grew up, I grew up in Lodi, New Jersey. No, but I listen, schools are hotbeds of disease and sicknesses. And I mean, it's true. It's true. Like you said, it just spreads. But the thing is, I understand the concern, but call me an idealist. I mean, teachers are public servants, and you're dealing with a large population of kids who may not be safe at home, who may not get food at home, who might not have Wi-Fi, computers, iPads, anything, broadband access. So if you just want to shift to this remote learning, there are a lot of kids in Houston and Dallas, Austin, New York, LA, who are not going to be able to learn or have access to information the way other kids will, or food or a safe place. And so you have to consider that when you're going back to school. And so I think they need to be there, because I think they provide a service that is outside of what you typically consider a school service.
Bill King, we've just appointed you TEA commissioner. What would you do on this issue?
I think the kids need to be back in school in the fall for a lot of the reasons that Charles just pointed out. You know, minority inner city children are already disadvantaged. This further disadvantages them because they don't have the same access to the internet that other kids have. I think this will be determined by the course of the disease, which is still unfolding. Right now, the numbers are all improving dramatically every week. The fatalities are falling, the new cases are falling. Things look pretty good right now. Everybody's sort of worried about a resurgence in the fall. I think more likely we'll get it as part of the regular flu season in December and January. So we'll see how it plays out. But if it stays on the current trajectory, I suspect schools will be open in the fall.
I'm curious to hear what Carmen Rowe thinks about this. What if teachers say, look, I'm willing to teach remotely, but I'm not coming back into that classroom? And I know it's not probably your area of the law, but I do want your opinion.
No, so I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I'm also an adjunct professor at the University of Houston Law Center. And I can tell you there's two jobs that you can't phone in my opinion, and that's being a lawyer and being a teacher. They, you know, to say otherwise, I think is to minimize the importance of the interaction between students and their professors or their teachers or their lawyer. And so it's one of those things where I know that we're going to have a lot of Zoom, and that's going to be the new normal because we can do that in a lot of scenarios. This is not one of them. And I don't think we can cheapen or lessen the importance of a teacher in a classroom being able to interact directly with children.
Great discussion. We're going to leave it there. Still ahead, alleging collusion with China, the president severs all ties with the World Health Organization. Our panel dives in when we come back. Welcome back. The 45th president of these United States made good on a threat Friday, cutting all ties with the World Health Organization, which he says is controlled by the Chinese and helped cover up that country's unsuccessful effort to contain the coronavirus. The United States contributes more than $400 million a year to the WHO, and that's about 10% of its total funding. Democrats accuse Mr. Trump of attempting to scapegoat the WHO as cover for mistakes made by his own administration. Meantime, the American Medical Association is pleading with the president to reconsider, and the editor of the prominent medical journal, The Lancet, wrote, quote, "The U.S. government has gone rogue at a time of humanitarian emergency." Okay, crew, does it make no sense to do this in the middle of a global outbreak, or is the president justified? Let's go straight to Bill King.
Yeah, this is one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard out of this administration so far. I had frankly hadn't paid too much attention to the World Health Organization before this, and they've got issues. Don't misunderstand me. There's a lot of things about them that I find problematic, but we have to have a World Health Organization. This is an interconnected world. Diseases don't respect international boundaries. We've got to have a world organization that helps coordinate the response to these pandemics. If you don't like what it's doing, go in and fix it. Don't act like a petulant child and take your marbles and go home.
Wayne, is the president doing the right thing here?
So, look, I after Bill said it was the dumbest idea ever, I hate to disagree with him, but I sort of do, okay? But I would also add the United Nations and most international things, because quite honestly, they don't look out for us. We're the ones funding all this crap, right? And we're the ones who give them the most money. Why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep paying the bills for all this stuff that is not in the best interest of Americans? I don't get it. I really don't.
Okay, Charles, should we be jumping off the horse in the middle of the race, so to speak? I mean, look, maybe mistakes were made, but Lamar Alexander said this is not a good move.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to say whether we should or should not, because I really don't know, but I will say that this isn't without notice. I mean, the president sent a note, I think it was in early May, to WHO and pretty much to the world, saying that we were possibly going to cut funding. And in that letter, he quoted WHO, who I will quote now, which wrote a report saying preliminary investigation conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus. So that's what he's basing a lot of this off of. Now, whether he's right or wrong, I don't know. I think there should be question whether he has the authority to do this without Congress. But I do see where he's coming from if that anger is genuine there. And if we're funding them largely, we should not be getting misinformation like this.
Carmen, what's your take on this?
You know, I think this is yet another tactical move by Trump. I think he's bullying these people to get them to do what he thinks is the right thing. But at the end of the day, I'm with Charles. I don't know what the right answer is, but if it's true that these people are people we pay 10% of the bill for, and they're giving us either bad information or misinformation, which is, you know, a polite way of saying they were lying to us about corona, then they're not protecting us in the way that we need protection for the money that we're putting in. That I think you got to do something. I don't know if I agree with how Trump's going to handle it. And the only way to know whether that's going to work is in the next week or 2 weeks when they decide whether to fold and knuckle under or whether or not we really stay broken up with the World Health Organization. So
Tomorrow, final word goes to you. What do you think of this move?
I don't think it's a smart move because one thing about it, the WHO, and not only the WHO, even China was telling us about this back in October and November. And he has said on his own, to show you how disingenuous he is, he says that the numbers that they were projecting were over 1 million. And if he hadn't done what he did and shut down the country in the time that he did it, it would have been 1 million people dead. So he's already admitted, well, somebody told me something, you know, and because of that, I listened to it.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. Still to come, a story of love and survival in the time of coronavirus. You don't want to miss it, so stick around. Welcome back. While the scope of this pandemic and the right path forward remain a matter of debate, there should be no dispute over the lethality of COVID-19 for those deeply impacted. Houstonians Crystal and Adriel Mercier have shared a home, a family, and a life for the past 33 years. Until recently, the husband and wife shared a hospital, St. Luke's to be precise. Both were infected with COVID-19 and gravely ill. As the man she calls Poppy lay attached to a ventilator fighting for life, Crystal sent a message of ferocious love via FaceTime.
Because you're still in ICU and you're on a ventilator. I need you to fight. Because I don't want to leave you. I love you, Poppy. Please fight. I'm gonna wait for you. And for you to come home.
It was touch and go, but Poppy made it off that ventilator and back into Crystal's arms. He says simply, love conquers all. That's all the time we have. Just ahead, the discussion of national issues continues on Fox News Sunday with host Chris Wallace. From all of us here, have a healthy week.